$1,004,212. That's the number sitting in your brokerage account on a Thursday morning in March. Not a milestone you planned for that day, not a number you were watching for. You open the app to check your checking balance for something unrelated, groceries maybe, and there it is, sitting one tab over, quietly having crossed 7 figures sometime while you were asleep. You are 34. You've been investing since you were 24. You've been telling yourself for most of that decade that crossing $1 million would feel like something, a door opening, a weight lifting, some internal music swelling in a way that would announce itself. It doesn't. You sit on the edge of your bed, still in yesterday's clothes, and you feel almost nothing, which is its own specific kind of strange, because you expected to feel everything. The first rule: the day you become a millionaire is not designed to feel like anything. There's no ceremony built into a number. The feeling you were promised was always going to have to come from somewhere other than the account itself. You don't tell anyone, not your partner, not yet. Not because you're hiding it, but because you don't know what sentence to use that doesn't sound like something it isn't. You've watched other people announce numbers before, and you've watched what happens to the room when they do. It gets strange. People either want a piece of it, or they want to explain to you why it won't last. You've decided, somewhere along the way, without fully deciding it, that you'd rather sit with the number privately for a while before it becomes a thing other people have opinions about. You go to work that day. This is the part that surprises you most. Nothing about the actual day changes. You answer emails, you sit through a meeting about a project timeline that suddenly feels, for exactly one meeting, slightly absurd to be worrying about, though you can't fully articulate why. You eat the same lunch you always eat. You drive home in the same car you've had for 6 years, the one you paid off 2 years ago and never upgraded, because upgrading it never once felt like the actual goal. That night, you sit with your laptop open and you do something you didn't expect to do. You run the number forward instead of just admiring it backward. $1 million at a conservative 4% withdrawal rate generates $40,000 a year. You stare at that number for a long time. It is not nothing. It is also not freedom. It is not even close to replacing your income. The identity crisis isn't that you're unhappy with what you built, it's that you're realizing in real time that the milestone you spent a decade aiming at was never actually the destination. It was proof that the mechanism worked. The second rule: the first million doesn't buy your freedom. It buys you evidence that freedom is mathematically reachable, which is a completely different thing, and confusing them is where most people's excitement quietly turns into disappointment. You think back to who you were at 24. Sitting on a second-hand couch, moving $200 into savings and pulling it back out 3 days later because the number felt too precious to actually let sit. That version of you would not believe this Thursday exists. That version of you thought $1 million was a different category of person entirely, not a number reachable by someone folding laundry in a one-bedroom apartment and eating the same 6 meals on rotation. You've become the different category of person. You don't feel different. This gap between what you expected becoming this to feel like and what it actually feels like is the real story of the day, more than the number itself. You call your mother 2 days later, not to tell her the number, but just to talk. She asks how you're doing. You say, good, steady. She says, that's good. Eat something real. You hang up and you sit in the quiet of not having said it, the same quiet that's been sitting with you since Thursday morning, and you realize you don't fully know how to translate this milestone into language your family would have a reference point for. Nobody in your family has crossed this number before. There's no script handed down for what to say. So you say nothing, and the number stays yours alone for a while longer. The third rule: wealth crossed for the first time in a family is wealth crossed without a manual. You are building the vocabulary for it in real time, and that vocabulary gap is heavier than people expect. A week later, the number moves again, this time down, $31,000 in a single bad week for the market. You watch it happen in real time on your phone during a lunch break, and you notice something about your own reaction that surprises you. You don't panic. Not because you don't care about $31,000, you very much do, but because you understand, structurally now in a way you didn't at 24, that this is simply the cost of being invested in anything that grows. The volatility was never optional. It was the price of admission the whole time, and you'd already paid it in smaller amounts for a decade, without noticing it had a name. You start doing something you didn't do before crossing the number. You start thinking in decades instead of years. Before, a bad quarter felt urgent, something to fix, something to react to. Now, a bad quarter is data. One point on a much longer line that you've already watched bend upward more times than it's bent down. This shift in time horizon, more than the number itself, is the actual thing that changed on that Thursday, even if it took a few weeks to fully arrive. The fourth rule: crossing seven figures doesn't change your risk tolerance, it changes your time horizon. And time horizon is the actual asset that compounds. A month in, you finally tell your partner the specific number, not vaguely, exactly. The conversation is quieter than you expected, more practical. You talk about rebalancing, about whether the emergency fund is still sized correctly relative to the whole picture now, about what percentage should stay liquid versus what could reasonably move into something less accessible for a higher return over the next 15 years. This is the real version of the milestone conversation, not champagne. A spreadsheet open on the kitchen table on a Tuesday, two people making quiet, careful decisions about a number that took a decade to arrive and will take active attention to protect. You notice in the weeks after that you've stopped checking the account daily like you did in your 20s, back when every $100 felt like it needed watching. The number is large enough now that daily movements are noise, not signal. Checking obsessively stopped serving a purpose somewhere around $600,000, though you didn't notice the exact day it happened. This, too, is part of what nobody tells you. The relief isn't a single dramatic moment. It arrives gradually, in the form of things you simply stop needing to do. 3 months after that Thursday, you take a weekend trip, nothing extravagant, and for the first time in years, you don't think about money once during it. Not because you have unlimited money, you very much don't, but because the specific anxiety that used to sit underneath every purchase decision has gone quiet in a way you didn't fully register until it wasn't there anymore. The fifth rule: the actual reward for the first million isn't the number, it's the specific, quiet absence of a hum that used to run underneath everything you did, one you'd gotten so used to you'd forgotten it was there at all. And somewhere tonight, there's a 24-year-old on a second-hand couch, moving $200 into savings and pulling it back out 3 days later, believing that $1 million belongs to a different category of person entirely. It doesn't. It belongs to whoever keeps making the boring, undramatic, decade-long decision to let the machine run, quietly, in the background of an otherwise completely ordinary Thursday. $1,004,212. It always arrives like that. Quiet, undramatic, and nothing at all like what you were promised it would feel like.